Hey guys, tonight we journey deep into the wintry heart of medieval village life. Imagine you're wrapped in a cloak made of rough homespun wool. Outside, the wind is howling like it's got a vendetta, shaking shutters and slipping cold fingers through every crack in your hut's walls. Your breath fogs in front of your face, inside your home. Your straw-stuffed mattress crackles beneath you like last year's leaves. And the blanket. Let's just say it smells like wet goat and disappointment. You're not even sure it's yours. Oh, and spoiler alert, you probably won't survive this winter unless you've got some solid peasant-level coping skills. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Drop your location and local time in the comments. I always love seeing where and when you're tuning in from. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're a peasant in medieval Europe, and the sun has just slipped behind the frozen hills. The sky's gone dark, your fingers are stiff, and it's time to make peace with another long, bitterly cold night. Your house, well, hut, is made of timber, mud, and hope. Wattle and daub, as they call it. Insulation. That's a luxury. You can feel the wind exploring the room like a curious ghost. You pull the itchy woolen hood of your tunic tighter. Underneath, your shirt hasn't been changed in days, and your legs are swaddled in rough breeches, held up by whatever string or leather you could salvage from last year's shoes. You're not getting warm by taking anything off. Nope. This is layer and pray weather. Your mattress is just a wooden platform, or the floor, depending on how bad your luck's been, with a big sack of straw thrown on top. Sometimes the straw is fresh, sometimes it's mouldy. Either way, it's better than the floorboards, which radiate cold, like they've been communing with the dead. Blankets? If you have one, it's wool, heavy, and older than you are. If you're lucky, it hasn't been handed down through too many plague years. Historians still argue whether peasants really slept alone on personal mats or all shared larger sleeping platforms, but what's certain is that sleep was a communal, practical act. You don't go to bed for privacy. You go to bed because if you don't, you'll freeze. So you crawl under your one blanket, if you own one, and curl into a tight ball. You instinctively tuck your feet up, pressing them against the warmest part of your own body, your thighs or stomach. Doesn't matter if it cramps your style, you're going for heat efficiency, not elegance. This isn't Versailles. Sometimes you've added a little hay under your tunic, not for comfort, but to trap body heat. It pokes and scratches, sure, but hey, you're not in this for a spa experience. And then, there's the smell. Everything smells like animal, earth, and human effort. You might have tried to air things out earlier in the day, swinging open the crooked door to let the sun in, but mostly, you've just been stoking the hearth with damp wood and scraping ash into a corner. That smell is now your bedtime perfume. Outside, the snow has started again. You can hear it ticking on the thatched roof, piling slowly like someone stacking quilts on top of the night. It's oddly comforting, that soft rhythm, as long as the thatch holds. You remember last winter, when a leak above your head turned your sleep corner into a small indoor pond. You still get twitchy when you hear dripping. Tonight, the fire is nearly out. You used the last of the firewood for the stew earlier. Turnips, maybe a bit of barley if you were lucky, boiled into a thick, flavourless porridge. You probably didn't clean the pot. No point. The soot keeps pests away, and the cold will freeze the leftovers solid anyway. Some nights you dream of beds with feathers, pillows stuffed with down, and sheets that don't smell like sheep. But tonight, your only dream is staying warm enough to not wake up with frostbitten toes. There's a little dog curled up beside you. You didn't name it. It just started following you around one day, and you figured why not? It's warm, it's furry, and sometimes it scares the rats. You share body heat like best friends who never agreed to this arrangement. Nearby, someone coughs, loud, raspy. Could be your brother. Could be your uncle. Hard to say in the dark. You just hope it's not the kind of cough that turns into something worse. People don't usually survive worse out here. You close your eyes. Try to focus on your breathing. Long inhale, shorter exhale. That's what the village healer told you. Not that she's particularly scientific. Her main advice for surviving winter is rub goose fat on everything and pray. A fringe historical note. Some peasants believed sleeping with a warm stone, heated earlier by the fire and wrapped in rags, could help stave off the chill. You've tried it. Once. Burned a hole in your blanket. Your mother didn't speak to you for 2 days. The thing about medieval nights is that they're long. Uncomfortably long. You have nothing to do after sunset but stare at the ceiling, listen to the wind, and count how many toes you can still feel. You shift, you shuffle, you try to nest deeper into your scratchy little cocoon. Every movement releases a tiny puff of musty hay scent and sends a ripple through the chilly straw. Eventually, you drift off. Not deeply, just enough to stop noticing the cold. The sound of your own shivers blends with the breathing around you. It's a choir of survival. No lullabies, just sniffles and sighs. And then, snap. A log shifts in the hearth. Not loudly, but loud enough. Your eyes flick open. You don't know what time it is. Doesn't matter. Time means nothing when the only measure is how dark it gets and how long until morning. Sleep comes in pieces here, thin and scattered, like rags sewn into something barely resembling a quilt. You grab what you can, and if you're lucky, the next time you wake, there'll be frost crusting the walls, but still breath in your chest. You wake up in the same position you fell asleep in, curled like a human question mark, arms tucked, knees high, nose buried in the fold of your sleeve where the fabric still holds a little warmth. You're stiff, your mouth's dry, and your toes are staging a protest against existence. The hut is so cold, you're not entirely sure you didn't wake up outside. Above you, the low thatch roof hunches like an old man's back. The walls, just bundles of sticks smeared with mud, do their best to pretend they're solid. But let's be honest, they're lying. Every winter wind that whips across the fields finds its way through cracks in the plaster. There's no glass in the window, just a wooden shutter that fits about as well as your last pair of shoes. Which is to say, not at all. You can hear the wind howling again. It snakes its way through the walls, poking you behind the ears, across the ankles, anywhere your blanket fails to reach. There's no such thing as a draft-proof cottage in your world, just degrees of leaky. In fact, the average peasant house in medieval Europe was a masterclass in ventilation, unintentionally. No insulation, no chimney, just an open hearth in the middle of the floor and a hole in the roof where the smoke might escape. Might. More often than not, it billowed into the room, turning your lungs into tiny soot bags. You'd think you'd get used to breathing smoke. You don't. Even worse, that warm smoke, which might have offered a bit of comfort, doesn't stick around. Warm air rises, and since your home has no ceiling to trap it, all that heat goes straight up through the thatch. Meanwhile, the cold sinks and settles around you like a wet blanket made of invisible icicles. Medieval architecture. 0 stars for energy efficiency. Historians still argue whether most cottages had internal partitions or just open space, but most agree that in the poorest homes, everything happened in a single smoky room. Eating, sleeping, praying, arguing, hiding from chores. You hear a soft clatter. Something fell. A spoon, maybe. Could be a mouse knocking something over again. You don't get up. That would involve moving. you've become a disciple of stillness, which conserves precious body heat. But your eyes adjust a little. It's still pitch black, but not completely. A sliver of moonlight slips through a gap in the shutter. You can see your breath curling in the air like a tiny ghost. You try to breathe slower, pretend you're somewhere warmer, maybe in a proper castle bed with tapestries and fur throws. Just don't think too hard about how castles have their own draft issues and much higher ceilings for the cold to dance around in. A voice groans from the far side of the room. Someone's shifting under their blanket, or trying to. The straw rustles. A cough, thick and damp. That's not new. Half the village is coughing. You suspect it's the same cough making the rounds since last harvest. You pull your blanket tighter, adjusting the edge around your shoulders. The blanket, for the record, is heavy. Wool, maybe sheep's wool, maybe goat. Hard to tell when it's been patched 37 times and hasn't seen a full washing since the Feast of St. Agnes 2 winters ago. But it is warm. Sort of, if you lie very still. And don't ask too many questions about what's living in it. A fringe custom some peasants swore by. Hanging salted meat or herbs from the beams to deter spirits and rats. You once slept under a dangling string of smoked sausages for a week. You're not sure it helped with spirits, but you had some wild dreams. At least tonight, the thatch above you is holding. You remember one stormy night last winter when a chunk of the roof gave out and dumped half a snowdrift directly onto your legs. You woke up mid-blizzard, indoors. The snow melted fast, soaked your straw bed, and then froze again. You slept on an ice sponge for 3 days until the sun showed its face. You shift your weight slightly, and the straw beneath you crackles again. It's a comforting sound in its own scratchy way. Reminds you that you're not on the bare ground. Peasants who really had it rough sometimes just curled up on the hard-packed earth, maybe with an old sack beneath them, maybe not. So, in comparison, your straw-stuffed mattress is practically a featherbed. Oh, and if you're wondering, yes, you still have your boots on, and your tunic, and your wool hose, and your cap, if you're lucky enough to own one. You sleep in layers, because taking anything off is an act of extreme optimism. And let's not forget the smell of damp. The kind of deep, earthy damp that seems to cling to the air after decades of unventilated nights. Every wall has soaked up a century of seasons, and now they exhale it in little ghostly puffs every winter, cold and musty, like someone bottled November and sprayed it in your face. By now, your face is numb. You rub your nose absent-mindedly and feel the crust of frost starting to form on your upper lip. Not uncommon. In fact, in particularly bad winters, even the water in your bedside jug would freeze solid. Not that you have a jug, but you know the type who does. Probably the miller's wife. She has a cupboard. You think briefly of getting up to stoke the fire, but no. You'd have to leave your warm spot. And warm is relative. You're not so much warm as less cold than the rest of the room, which is about as good as it gets this time of year. Eventually you do drift off again, just enough for time to lose its edges. You dream of strange things, maybe fields of green, maybe roosters made of bread. Dreams don't always make sense, but sometimes they smell like spring, and that's enough. And when you stir next, the wind is still clawing at the shutters. The draft is still ghosting across your ankles. But your straw hasn't betrayed you, and your blanket is still clinging on like a loyal friend. It's a small victory, and in the medieval night, small victories matter more than you'd think. The first thing you feel when you wake again isn't light. It's cold. The kind that settles in your bones before your brain even catches up. You don't know if it's morning yet. It might be, or it might be that hazy space between first and second sleep. More on that odd medieval rhythm later. What you do know is that your nose feels like it's been dipped in snow. Your fingers are stiff and, oh joy, your left foot has found a pocket of cold straw that feels like it was made by winter itself. You shuffle deeper into your makeshift bed, trying to remember why exactly people said these layers worked. Because right now, you're basically wearing your entire wardrobe, and you still feel like a chilled turnip. So let's talk about your winter fashion. Medieval peasant edition. There are no closets here, no seasonal wardrobe swaps. What you're sleeping in. That's also what you wore to gather firewood, feed the pigs, and trudge through knee-deep slush to attend church on St. Somebody's Day. It's the same outfit, day in, day out, with maybe a few alterations. An extra tunic, a new hole, some recently acquired mud. You've got layers. Not because you're following some #cozycore trend, but because layering is how you survive. Under everything is your linen shirt, stained, worn thin, and permanently wrinkled into your shape. Over that, your woolen tunic, rough, itchy, and possibly older than you. The weave is loose, the thread's thick, and yes, it sheds like an unwell sheep. Your legs are wrapped in wool hose, stitched by your mother, probably, and your feet are shoved into leather shoes or boots if you're lucky. But let's be honest, they're mostly just thick slabs of cowhide that sort of resemble footwear if you squint. In winter, they're often stuffed with straw or even animal hair, anything to block the wind and fill the gaps. You can't feel your toes anyway, so fit isn't your main concern. Historians still debate how many layers peasants typically wore in winter and how regional variations influence materials, but most agree that wool was life, not just for clothing, but for blankets, socks, hoods, even for wrapping sore joints and swaddling babies. Wool was your medieval duct tape. And then there's your outer cloak. If you're fortunate, it's heavy and hooded. If you're not, it's thin, holey, and smells like wet sheep and pickled onions. Either way, it's the final barrier between you and the night air. You sleep in it. You work in it. You might even get buried in it. Talk about versatile. You shift slightly under your blanket, another layer of woven wool, patched and repatched by candlelight. You remember your mother sewing it with cold fingers, the way she muttered under her breath each time the thread snapped. Stupid thread. Stupid winter. Stupid everything. A family lullaby of sorts. A fringe tidbit here. Some peasants believed rubbing warm ashes on the soles of your feet before bed could help trap heat. You tried it once. It mostly made you itchy. You now understand why that practice didn't take off in fashion circles. You tuck your hands under your armpits and sigh. Even your breath feels colder than usual. You sniff. Yep, that's definitely damp wool, and something vaguely animalish. Is it you? Possibly. Hygiene has taken a bit of a back seat since the frost set in. You're not about to strip and bathe in a wooden tub in December unless someone very important tells you to. And even then, they better bring hot stones and prayers. As you shift again, you feel the seams of your tunic pulling slightly at your shoulders. It's tight. You've grown since last winter. Your mother tried letting it out, but the fabric is stretched as far as it will go. So, it pinches. Not ideal for sleeping, but then again, very few things in this room are. Suddenly, there's a flutter of movement in the rafters. You freeze. Your eyes snap open. Could be birds. Could be rats. Could be something worse. You listen. Scratch, scratch. Yep, rat or squirrel. Either way, not your problem right now unless it falls directly onto your face. You focus instead on adjusting the bundle of rags you use as a pillow. Not really a pillow, just a shirt wrapped around another shirt with a sock inside. But you've grown attached to it. Sometimes you whisper secrets into it before you drift off. You've named it. Not out loud, though. That'd be weird. The wind whips again, slapping the side of the house. You feel it along your back where your tunic has ridden up slightly. You grit your teeth and yank the hem down. This is the nightly ritual. Adjust. Tuck mutter. Repeat. You try not to think about what happens if your blanket slips off in the night. Or worse, if someone borrows it. Yes, shared spaces mean shared resources, but there are lines. You once woke up blanketless, with your little brother wrapped in it like a burrito. You still haven't forgiven him. Still, there's some comfort in the communal misery. You're not alone in this cold. Everyone's layering. Everyone's improvising. Sometimes someone sews rabbit fur into the inside of their cloak. Luxury. Other times, someone gets creative and starts wearing two hats. There's no such thing as overdressed when your teeth are chattering like castanets. And even in the midst of all this discomfort, there's a certain peace to the slow rhythm of night. The house creaks. The straw shifts. A muffled snore from across the room. Everything settles into its place. You in your layers, wrapped like a sad cabbage, waiting for the sun. You try to remember a warmer night, maybe last summer, under the stars, when the fire was just for cooking, not survival. You promise yourself you'll never complain about heat again. You will, of course. But for now it's a nice lie. And just before you drift off, you feel it. The tiniest pocket of warmth between your knees, trapped under layers of wool, hay, and hope. It's enough. Just barely. You're not alone under the blanket anymore. At some point between your last waking breath and now, bodies shifted. Your little brother must have rolled towards you in his sleep, probably chasing warmth like a moth to flame. His cold toes press against your calf like tiny icicles with opinions. You grunt, but don't move. This is how it works. Everyone inches closer together through the night, like rats in a grain sack. Not for love, though sure, there's some of that too, but for survival. This is the medieval peasant version of central heating, family clustering. It's the most dependable heat source in a world where wood is precious, fire is fickle, and the night stretches on like a sermon from Father Bertrand. And so, every evening, you all become a pile of elbows, knees, and coarse wool. One big, reluctant cuddle. And yes, that includes the dog again. You think her name is Mags, though no one ever actually agreed on it. She's somewhere near your feet now, curled into a suspiciously efficient donut of warmth. You're not sure who let her under the blanket. Probably your sister. She has a soft spot for strays, including the human kind. The older ones, your parents, your grandfather, they don't mind the heap of bodies. They're used to it. They came from even colder huts and even fewer blankets. You once heard your grandfather slept in a barn loft with 8 siblings and a goat named Thomas. He says Thomas snored. You believe him. Historians still debate whether it was common for entire families to sleep in a single bed or simply a shared room. But oral traditions and folk practices suggest that communal sleeping was absolutely the norm. Beds weren't private, they were efficient. And frankly, warmth didn't care about personal space. You shift slightly and bump into your sister's elbow. She groans in protest, but doesn't open her eyes. There's a certain unspoken etiquette to the midnight shuffle. Don't hog the blanket. Keep your feet to yourself. And for heaven's sake, no one gets up unless it's really necessary. Chamber pots exist, but they're communal. And aiming in the dark is risky business. There's not much in the way of furniture, just a low platform made from uneven planks, resting on stones to keep the moisture out. The whole family sleeps on it, shoulder to shoulder. Those who don't fit, or those who came home late, claim a patch of straw on the floor. It's not dignified, but neither is frostbite. The walls echo faintly with every snore, cough, and sleepy murmur. Your father's snores have developed their own rhythm, somewhere between a bellows and a bear with allergies. Your mother mumbles prayers in her sleep. You catch something about St. Blaise and turnip harvests, classic bedtime material. There's a sort of comfort in this closeness. The mingled smell of wool, sweat, ash, and hay is familiar, even calming. It tells your brain, you're not freezing to death yet, you're just poor and semi-conscious. And when you do start to drift, it's to the sound of breathing. 5, maybe 6 bodies rising and falling, like slow waves on a lumpy sea. You can feel your sister's hand against your arm, your brother's leg twitching as he dreams, Mags occasionally letting out a sleepy grunt that may or may not mean, "You moved the blanket." And it's not just your family. In the next cottage over, the baker's family is doing the exact same thing. Except they've got twins. Double the noise. Across the lane, the Thatcher and his 3 daughters probably sleep in a hayloft above the donkey. You've done that too on occasion. It's warmer than you'd expect. And no, you didn't mind the donkey. He had a nice temperament and surprisingly warm breath. A quirky tradition you once overheard. Some families swore by sleeping spooned clockwise, everyone facing the same direction, to minimize squabbles and maximize blanket coverage. You tried it once. It lasted about 12 minutes before someone rolled the wrong way and started a small, sleepy fight. And even though your body aches from the packed-in sleeping situation, your arm's gone numb and there's straw poking your hip, you know you'd rather be here than alone. Alone is cold. Alone is dangerous. Alone is for the rich, with their separate rooms and their curtains and their suspicious lack of livestock. Besides, this is when the best whispers happen. Late at night, when the fire's embers are barely glowing and your breath curls like smoke, that's when secrets come out. A cousin quietly shares the name of a girl he likes. Your sister confesses she saw lights in the woods, probably just the miller's boy with a torch, but she insists it was a fairy. You tell no one you heard it all. That's the rule. Sometimes your mother tells stories, not loudly, just a whisper, half to herself, half to you. Tales of saints, wolves, brave girls who outwitted the cold by making cloaks from cloud mist and spider silk. You don't know if you believe them, but they help. Sometimes no one talks. Just breathing. Just warmth. Just the steady comfort of not being alone. You pull your arm back under the blanket and wiggle your fingers into your tunic for warmth. You feel your brother's heel near your hip and consider pushing it away, but then think better of it. It's a small price to pay for 5 extra degrees of body heat. So you lay there, wrapped in wool, sandwiched between siblings, the dog somewhere near your shins, and the roof creaking under another gust of wind. Outside, the world is frozen solid. Inside, your patchwork family blanket beast resists the night just a little longer. You're not quite awake, not quite asleep, just hovering in that peculiar medieval space where the fire's gone to embers. The wind is still prowling outside, and your body insists it's time to shift positions. Again. But you don't want to move. Not because you're especially comfortable, but because comfort is so fragile here. One wrong wiggle and your shoulder will hit cold straw, your blanket will slide off, and someone, probably your father, will grumble in their sleep like a volcano about to erupt. You open your eyes a sliver. It's too dark to see properly, but there's a glow coming from the hearth, a red-orange whisper of firelight, just enough to cast faint shadows on the wall. You try to remember if anyone got up to feed it recently. You hope someone did. Because if that fire dies completely, you're in for a long, frosty early morning. Then you hear it, a creak of movement near the hearth. Someone is up. In the dim light, you make out a hunched figure shuffling on the uneven floorboards, wrapped in a tattered cloak. It's probably your uncle, the one who always takes the first watch. He mutters something under his breath, either a curse or a prayer, and pokes the fire with a stick until it exhales a puff of smoke. He adds a log, the dry wood catching with a reluctant hiss. You don't say anything, you just lie there, still as a pile of folded laundry, watching the glow grow stronger. It pushes the shadows back, just a little. You feel a flicker of heat brush across your face. It doesn't last long, but it's enough to ease the stiffness in your hands. This is the night watch, a quiet, unofficial ritual that happens in homes like yours all over the countryside. Fires are precious, and they're dangerous. They must be fed, but not too often. Tended, but not trusted. A hearth in the middle of a one-room wooden cottage is a blessing and a ticking time bomb. Historians still debate whether families had fixed shifts for fire watching, or if people simply woke naturally and checked the flames. In truth, it was likely a mix of both. Someone always half slept with one ear turned toward the crackle and one hand ready to slap a spark before it became a blaze. You remember that fire 2 winters ago. It started with a stray ember, leapt to a fallen bundle of straw, and by the time the dog barked, the back wall was smoking like a blacksmith's forge. You lost your best wooden spoon in that fire. The family still talks about it in hushed tones, like a ghost story that smells faintly of ash and panic. So now, someone always stays half awake. Sometimes it's your uncle, sometimes it's you. You've taken turns before, shivering by the hearth with your cloak wrapped tight, poking at embers with a stick and trying not to fall asleep. Your job is to keep it alive but contained. A living creature with a short temper and a long memory. There's something oddly peaceful about this role. In the stillness, while everyone else snores in awkward harmony, you get to witness the house in its quietest state. You hear the wood groan, the wind sigh, the occasional scuttle of something small in the corner. It's a little eerie, sure, but it's also a kind of meditative misery. A quirky tradition you learned from your grandmother. She used to sprinkle salt in a ring around the hearth before bed. To keep out wandering spirits, she said, and thieves. You're not sure how effective it was, but she did it every night, humming softly. You sometimes still see the faint white lines in the soot when the fire burns low. Tonight, your uncle settles into the stool by the fire, 3 legs, 1 wobbly, and drapes his cloak over his knees. He stares into the flames with the kind of expression only medieval men seem to perfect. 1 part existential dread, 2 parts onion digestion. His breath puffs like smoke as he mutters again. Maybe a psalm, maybe just last week's gripes about the Thatcher's prices. You wonder what he thinks about during these hours. Does he remember his youth? Count how many winters he's made it through? Watch the shadows to see if anything stirs. You once asked him, as he nodded off mid-watch, what the scariest part of the job was. He didn't say fire. He didn't say wolves. He said, "It's when you think the house is empty, but it isn't." And then he wouldn't say anything else. Classic uncle. You shift again, your blanket rustling. Someone beside you stirs and huffs in annoyance, pulling the fabric tighter. Sorry, just trying to save one shoulder from freezing, not start a war. There's a cough, the kind that echoes with dampness and straw dust. From your cousin, maybe. It's hard to tell in the dark. In any case, the firelight has grown enough to outline the room's humble chaos. Tools hanging on pegs, the pile of winter shoes near the door, and that one ceramic jug that leaks but no one ever throws away because it's still good for dry stuff. Even now, in the dead of night, you feel the house breathing around you. You feel how fragile everything is. A spark, a wind, a cough. Any of these could unravel the warmth you've managed to scrape together. You've heard stories from the travelling friar. In the next village over, a house burned to the ground last month. Whole family made it out, but now they sleep in a barn with sheep and regret. He said they were lucky. You believe him. So the fire watcher stays, a guardian of warmth, a sentry against disaster, a silent, shivering lump of peasant determination. And eventually, you drift off again. Your last vision, that dim orange glow, the soft crunch of a log settling, your uncle's hunched form silhouetted against the heart of the home. The fire's alive. The night moves on. You rest just a little deeper. You wake with a strange sensation on your legs. Warmth. Not the usual vague ambient heat from the person beside you, but a solid, radiating presence that smells faintly of hay, manure, and cud? You peek under the edge of the blanket and meet a glossy brown eye blinking back at you. Ah, the cow has joined you. Well, not exactly on your sleeping mat, but she's settled just beside it, her bulk pressed against the rickety interior wall, leaking warmth into the room like a four-legged stove. You blink again. Yep, that's definitely the cow. You give her a sleepy nod. She doesn't respond, just chews slowly and stares ahead, lost in bovine dreams. Welcome to the barn life upgrade. See, when things get really bad, like lake frozen solid and your socks stand up by themselves bad, your entire household may make the executive decision to move into the barn, or, just as often, move parts of the barn into the house. That line between living quarters and livestock shelter gets pretty flexible when temperatures drop below. Maybe I'll just never feel my fingers again. Historians still debate the exact structure of these arrangements. Some peasant houses had built-in stalls for animals. Others had attached lean-tos or outbuildings you could slip into without facing the full wrath of winter. But the idea is consistent. When survival is the game, body heat is currency, and livestock are loaded with it. You adjust yourself under the blanket, trying not to disturb your human bunkmates while also avoiding getting kicked by a cow hoof. You succeed, mostly. There's a faint snort from your brother beside you, and a little grunt from the pig tucked near the hearth. She's not a pet, she's pork in progress. But right now, she's your space heater. And it's not just cows and pigs, chickens too, though they're less cuddly and more chaotic. You remember last winter when a hen escaped her roost and landed on your grandmother's face at 3 a.m. Feathers flew, swears were muttered, no one slept the rest of the night. There's something deeply surreal about sharing your sleep with livestock. On the one hand, it's practical. Animal heat can raise the ambient temperature of a room by a surprising amount. On the other, it means waking up to the comforting sound of cloven hooves shuffling near your head, or the lovely fragrance of wet fur wafting from under the table. You've become used to it, sort of. You roll onto your back and stare at the ceiling beams. From here, you can see where someone hung last year's dried garlic to ward off spirits, or mice. Both, ideally. Next to it dangles a bundle of herbs, probably sage or rosemary, which your aunt insists keeps the air clean. You're skeptical. Between the goat's breath and your uncle's socks, this air is far past help. Still, there's a strange sense of comfort in it all. You're warm. Not boiling, not toasty, but not shivering, and in winter, that's as close to a luxury suite as you're going to get. The animals shuffle, grunt, sigh. It's like sleeping in a barn-shaped lullaby. And yes, it's cramped. You're wedged between your brother, the dog, and an ambitious hen trying to nest in a shoe. Your mother is half snoring, half praying again, and your father keeps murmuring about snow rot on the barley. But the heat from the cow's flank is real and steady, and for the first time in days, your feet don't feel like woodblocks. Fringe detail. Some folks believed sleeping near animals not only warmed you, but protected you spiritually. Pigs were thought to repel evil spirits. Horses could see ghosts. Chickens. Well, chickens were mostly for eggs, but at least they screamed if something startled them, which counted as security. You shift again, and your knee presses against something damp and squishy. You don't want to know, you really don't want to know. Instead, you tuck your arms in tighter and pull the blanket up to your chin. It still smells like sheep and smoke, but now with undertones of cow. It's not just warmth you gain from these shared quarters. You also get noise. Constant, odd, low-level noise. A soft moo, a snort, a loud hiccup from your cousin. Every time you think it's silent, someone coughs, or the dog farts, or the goat sneezes like a person possessed. You used to find it impossible to sleep through. Now, It's just the soundtrack of survival. A historian once wrote that medieval peasant homes blurred the line between the domestic and the agricultural. You'd say that's putting it politely. Your current bedroom is a hay-strewn, manure-perfumed, wool-blanketed mashup of species, and it's working. You remember when you first heard about the wealthier households? Rooms with actual doors, straw mattresses layered with goose feathers, curtains. Imagine that. Fabric specifically meant to keep out drafts, rather than just hangover potatoes. You dreamed of it for a while, but you've since adjusted your expectations. A warm cow pressed against your wall is good enough. As the night stretches on, the fire sighs again, a little louder. Someone's shifted the log. Your uncle must be up again, or maybe your cousin, trying to sneak a warm stone into her blanket. She learned the hard way that you can't wrap a stone in a dry leaf and expect it not to catch fire. A few feet away, the pig snorts in her sleep. You hear her shift, then go still. In the half-light, you can just make out the soft curve of the cow's back. She's settled in for the night, her tail twitching once, like punctuation. You smile, just barely, and close your eyes again. This isn't comfort in the modern sense. But it is, in its own strange, barn-scented way, a kind of peace. You're not sure what woke you, maybe a breeze, maybe a twitching elbow. But now that you're alert, there's no denying it. Your back itches. Not the casual, oh, I'll scratch it later kind of itch either. This one is alive. It scurries. You shudder and instinctively scratch through the layers of your tunic, blanket, and whatever other questionable textiles are draped across your spine. Welcome to the real medieval bedtime battle. The war of the bugs. You try not to panic. That just makes it worse. But deep down, you know, it's not just dry skin or straw pokes. This is personal. This is a flea, or a mite, or, heaven help you, a bed bug. You sigh, roll over and shift your shoulders. The blanket rustles, someone mutters, and a nearby chicken gives a sleepy squawk. Nobody wakes. Everyone's fighting their own itches. In the world of medieval sleep, pest management was a daily, well, nightly concern. Your mattress, straw, replaced semi-regularly. But that straw, it's the Ritz-Carlton for vermin. Fleas, lice, mites, beetles. If it wriggles, bites, or burrows, it lives in your bed. Historians are pretty unanimous on this one. Cleanliness was not medieval Europe's strong suit. That's not to say peasants wanted to sleep in filth. They simply had fewer tools to avoid it. Soap was precious. Water was cold. Lye burned your skin. So instead of scrubbing down everything daily, people developed a tolerance and a robust relationship with scratching. You reach beneath the edge of your tunic and run your fingernails across your ribs. It doesn't help. Not really. In fact, now your arm itches too. You're fairly certain one of these little monsters has mapped your entire body by now. A quirky trick your aunt once showed you. Sprinkle crushed pennyroyal under your mattress. Keeps the bedbugs away, she claimed, and the bad spirits. You tried it. It smelled like mint and sadness. The bedbugs, apparently, didn't mind. You've even heard of people heating their bedding near the fire each night to try and roast out the fleas. Bold move. Risky. One cousin got a little too ambitious and burned a hole clean through his blanket. The fleas lived. The blanket did not. Your own family has developed an elaborate scratch hierarchy. You're allowed one big wriggle an hour. Any more and someone complains. Your grandfather has a cough-scratch combo that shakes the floorboards. Your little sister just kicks until someone scratches her back for her. She's clever like that. But the real pest nemesis, the lice. Head lice are not a minor inconvenience here. They're roommates. You've been deloused more times than you can count, usually with vinegar, lard, and a special wooden comb with teeth so close together it might as well be a medieval torture device. The lard stinks, the vinegar stings, the comb pulls, and afterward, you're still itchy. Historians still argue whether medieval people understood the transmission of lice, or whether they saw it as an unavoidable nuisance. Some folk remedies point to an understanding of infestation. Others suggest they blamed the lice on bad air, or even sin. You personally blame your brother. He definitely doesn't wash his tunic as often as he says he does. You sit up slightly now, just enough to adjust your blanket and inspect your arms. You can't see anything, but that means nothing. These bugs are stealthy. They wait. They bite when you're finally warm and peaceful. You're starting to suspect they've developed their own bedtime schedule. At your feet, the dog grunts and flops sideways. You love her, but let's be honest, she's a flea limousine. Every time she shakes, it's like nature's glitter cannon of parasites. Your sister mumbles something about, "Don't take my turnips," in her sleep, and rolls closer to the wall. She's probably having one of those stress dreams again, or possibly just dreaming of turnips. It's hard to tell in winter. The fire crackles faintly, throwing just enough light to reveal the state of the floor, scattered hay, the occasional feather, and a single, highly suspicious beetle marching with authority. You salute it quietly. Respect. You try to focus on something else, anything else, your mother's breathing, the creaking of the rafters, the gentle weight of your blanket, now repositioned to trap the bugs with you, which is somehow worse. You imagine you're in a far-off land, perhaps a warm inn with a feather mattress and clean sheets that smell like herbs, not goats. Then you remember, in those fancy inns, they also had lice. Rich people just powdered over it with lavender and pretended they didn't. You're not missing out, just simplifying. A particularly bold itch flares up on your neck. You slap at it. Nothing, just a phantom bite. The skin there is already raw from earlier. You sigh. You've reached the itching out of spite stage. Still, you're not entirely without defenses. Every few weeks, when the sun cooperates, you drag your bedding outside and beat the ever-loving daylights out of it. Literally. You hang your blanket over a rope and whack it with a stick until dust, hair, and mystery particles erupt into the air like some cursed festival. It helps. A little. Then it rains, and you start all over again. You know of one woman in the next village who claims she sleeps in a hammock slung between two beams. No mattress, no straw, just air. She says it keeps the bugs from climbing in. You once tried to make one using your cloak and 2 broomsticks. You woke up on the floor with a twisted ankle and a new appreciation for flat surfaces. Eventually, the itching dulls. Or maybe your nerves give up. You curl deeper into the blanket and try to find a patch of skin that doesn't feel like it's been crawled over by a tiny militia. You find one. Your elbow, blessed elbow. It's not glamorous, this battle, but it's part of the night, like fire maintenance, like coughing in chorus, like whispering stories while clutching the warmth of another body. You itch, you scratch, you survive. You start to drift again. Somewhere between the scratching and the warmth, your mind floats off. You dream of floating in a bath, hot, clean, flea-free. Then quickly change that to floating in a tub of porridge, because that's a more realistic fantasy. The fire sighs, the cow shifts, a beetle continues its solemn pilgrimage across the hearthstone. You sleep, uneasily, but you sleep. You stir to the sound of something bubbling. Not the fire, it's too low for that, but something thick and gloopy, slow like mud sliding off a spoon. Then the smell hits you, earthy, pungent, and almost comforting. You open your eyes, and the dim grey light leaking through the shutter tells you it's still early. Just shy of dawn, probably. But someone is up. You hear the familiar clank of a wooden ladle against a pot and the creak of someone squatting beside the hearth. The pig, still curled near the warm stones, grunts softly as a sleepy greeting. You sit up a little, rubbing your eyes. Across the room, Your mother is ladling out what you already know will be breakfast, and dinner, and maybe lunch if there's enough. Porridge. A thick beige sludge made of boiled grains. Barley, rye, or oats if you're lucky, spelt if you're not. Sometimes it's just wheat chaff that's been scraped off the floor and stirred into hot water. And if it's not porridge, it's onions boiled until they give up. Or cabbage. Or yesterday's cabbage. Or yesterday's cabbage reimagined as soup. You adjust your tunic and shuffle toward the hearth where warmth clings to the air like breath. The dog's already there, eyes half closed, tail thumping lazily. She knows food's near, and even if it's not for her, she likes the smell, or the steam, or the attention. Your mother hands you a wooden bowl. No spoon. You're expected to sip, slurp, or dip in a chunk of bread if there's any left from yesterday. The porridge is hot, and it smells like slightly burnt grain and desperation, but you grip the bowl with both hands and let the steam hit your face. It warms your nose, your cheeks. You could kiss this bowl. Food in the medieval winter is less about satisfaction and more about function. This isn't indulgent. It's survival. You need heat. You need bulk. You need something that will sit in your belly and lie to your brain about being full until sunset. Historians agree that most peasants ate a lot of gruel, pottage and bread, dense, heavy, and often coarse as sand. The grain might be mixed with beans, root vegetables, or whatever was available. Meat? Rare. Unless an animal died or you were working for a feast day, it wasn't showing up in your pot. But today, there's something extra in the porridge. You tilt the bowl and squint. Onions. Maybe a few shreds of dried leek. Your mother must have bartered with the widow down the path. That's a treat, a bold one. You blow on the bowl and take a careful sip. It's scalding, sticks to your tongue, and tastes vaguely like a boiled sock, but a warm boiled sock, and right now, that's everything. A small debate still lingers among historians. Was breakfast a regular event for medieval peasants, or more of an occasional necessity? What's clear is that if there was food and your stomach was growling, you ate. Meals weren't romanticized. They were moments of quiet determination, often eaten in silence while staring into a bowl. But there's another reason this morning meal matters. Warmth. You feel it spread down your throat, into your chest, and finally to your stomach, where it seems to whisper, "Hold tight. We'll get through this." It's almost magic. Not wizard kind of magic, but temporary illusion of life being okay kind of magic. You glance around. Others are waking. Your brother stumbles over, hair stuck to one side of his head, eyes puffy. He gets a bowl and slumps next to you. No words exchanged, just a nod and a grunt. You both eat like monks, spoonless and focused. Your father is slower to rise. His joints ache when it's cold. You can hear him sighing as he swings his legs off the straw mattress. The fire's drawn him too. All roads lead to warmth. There's a lull in the soundscape, just the soft scrape of bowls, the dog's occasional sniff, and the sizzle of a log catching fire. Even the pig has gone quiet, content with the general heat and hope of dropped food. One of your favourite fringe memories comes back to you. Your grandmother, years ago, added honey to the porridge on a feast day. Real honey. Thick, golden, shimmering like amber in the firelight. It tasted like sunlight. She told you, this is what kings eat for breakfast. You weren't sure if that was true, but you believed her. That moment tasted like a fairy tale. You glance into your bowl now. No honey, no fantasy, just sustenance. But it's warm, and in the heart of winter, that's more than most dreams offer. As the meal winds down, your mother starts clearing bowls. Not washing. There's no water to spare for that yet. Just stacking them neatly, wiping with a cloth that's seen too many meals. She sprinkles a few ashes over the remaining food to deter flies or curious mice, a trick passed down generations. Your father pokes the fire again, sending up a cloud of sparks. For a second, they dance like stars before fading into the smoke, curling up into the rafters. You wonder if today will be cold again. You already know the answer. But for now, your belly is full, or at least less empty. Your fingers are wrapped around a warm bowl. The fire crackles, and outside the wind still hums, but inside, you've carved out a small pocket of heat and stillness. And tonight, you'll probably eat this again. Maybe with less onion. Maybe with more bread if someone trades right. Maybe with none at all, if the storm lasts longer than expected. But you'll still huddle by the fire, still clutch the bowl like a treasure, and still pretend the porridge tastes better than it does. Because it's not really about the taste, it's about the ritual. Porridge. Every night, every winter. It might not be magic, but it's survival in a bowl. After porridge, after the bowls are wiped out and stacked, after the dog gives the floor a final hopeful sniff for crumbs, the house falls into that strange winter quiet again. Not truly silent, but thoughtful. Sleep isn't over yet, not for everyone. Some go back to the straw. Others just sit by the fire, staring at it like it might tell them a secret. You lie back, your belly radiating gentle warmth. The room still smells of smoke and onions, and that's oddly soothing. Your body hums with low-grade comfort, a sensation so rare in this season it feels like a luxury. But as you start to drift, your mother clears her throat and begins her murmured prayers. Not loud, not for performance, just a steady whispering rhythm that blends into the crackling of the fire, like a lullaby for the soul. Pater noster, qui es in caelis. You don't say the words aloud, you never do, but they're there, stitched into the seams of your thoughts. Everyone knows them. They're as constant as the cold, as ever-present as the wind in the rafters. Night in medieval villages wasn't just cold and dark, it was charged. This was when things happened. Quiet things, unseen things, things with too many teeth or no feet at all. The spirits, the demons, the ghosts of people who froze in winters past, still prowling the woods in breathless silence. You pull the blanket up higher over your face. Libra nos amalo. In your family, no one sleeps without some kind of protection. Some people tuck sprigs of dried herbs under their pillows, rosemary for memory, lavender for peace, and mugwort for dreaming true. Others whisper little rhymes against the dark. One of your cousins sleeps with a nail under his bed. You once asked him why. He said, in case of witches. You didn't press. And then there are the stories, the ones that keep your eyes open a little longer after the fire's dimmed. There's the story of the old widow who wandered out into the snow one night and came back, different. She spoke in riddles, forgot her own name, and kept asking why the moon had teeth. She lasted a week before falling silent altogether. There's the tale of the ash boy, who lives under hearths and only comes out when the fire dies. If you hear rustling in the ashes and you're alone, don't look. And of course, the most well-known one, the nightmare. Not a horse, a demon, they say, that sits on your chest while you sleep, breathing its cold breath into your lungs and feeding on your fear. That heavy frozen sensation you sometimes get in the night. That's her, riding you like a shadow. Historians still argue whether the medieval concept of sleep paralysis was understood as medical or spiritual. Most peasants didn't distinguish. A bad dream wasn't just a dream, it was something. You didn't question it. You prayed it away. You felt her before, the nightmare. At least you think you have. One night, your body wouldn't move, no matter how hard you tried. Your eyes were wide open, You saw the fire, the rafters, the flickering shapes on the walls, and something else, a weight, pressing, invisible, cold. You told your mother the next day. She handed you a wooden charm and told you to place it above your bed. You did. You still do. Not everything is frightening, though. There are good things in the night too, or so you're told. Guardian spirits, kind ancestors, creatures that knit dreams and wrap them around your head like invisible scarves. You've never seen them, but sometimes in the deep night when the wind settles and the fire purrs low, it almost feels like someone is brushing your hair with unseen fingers. A quirky custom your aunt swears by, turning your boots upside down before bed so the spirits can't climb into them. You're not sure how they'd use the boots, but you don't question it. You did it once, and you didn't have nightmares. That's proof enough. Sometimes you dream of saints, figures in white robes with glowing hands. Other times you dream of wolves, or of falling through snow that never ends. Dreams are slippery, half-remembered things in the morning, but their weight lingers. Your grandmother used to say, "What you dream in winter stays in your bones until spring." Tonight, your thoughts flutter toward warmth, toward the odd stillness of the fire, toward the heavy comfort of your woolen blanket, toward the rhythm of your mother's prayers. She finishes softly, her voice barely more than breath. Amen. The house exhales. Then, creak. A soft sound by the door. Your eyes snap open. You listen. Not wind, not fire. Something slower, rhythmic. You glance toward the others. No one stirs. They're already asleep again. The dog raises her head but doesn't bark. She just watches the door with one eye, then lays back down. You tell yourself it's the wind. It probably is. Still, you whisper the charm your cousin taught you under your breath. By ash and thorn and burning coal, keep the dark from taking hold. It's not Latin. It's not even proper grammar. But it helps. You nestle deeper under the blanket. You feel your breath warm the space around your face. You close your eyes. You imagine saints, or porridge, or both. Because tonight, you survived another freezing evening. You've eaten. You've whispered prayers. You've braved the shadows. Whatever's out there in the dark can wait until morning. The room is dim now, not because it's dark outside, but because the light is deliberately low, just a candle, flickering in a clay holder by the hearth. The sun set long ago, but sleep doesn't come right away. Not here. Not yet. You're not quite lying down anymore. You're propped up on one elbow, sharing what little warmth is left in the fire with the rest of your family. All of you slowly melting into the straw like a sleepy herd. The fire's glow paints soft amber lines across familiar faces, highlighting cheeks, brows, noses red from cold and wind. Everyone looks a bit worn down, a bit hollow-eyed. But there's a softness to the moment too, the kind that only arrives after a hard day and a full belly. This, believe it or not, is prime gossip hour. Yes, even in the Middle Ages, when everyone had more pressing issues like surviving until April, people still wanted to know who was stealing whose chickens, who kissed behind the millhouse, and whether the blacksmith's wife really does add ashes to her bread to make it rise better. She does. It doesn't. You listen as your father leans in and tells your mother, quietly, but not quietly enough for you to miss, that the Reeves' new boots don't actually fit. Saw him limping up the path, he says, like he'd been kicked by his own ox. A soft chuckle ripples through the room. These are the moments where warmth isn't just about fire. It's in the shared jokes, the sideways glances, the gentle ribbing. And nothing makes you feel more alive than remembering, for a few minutes, that someone else's life is even more inconvenient than yours. You add your own tidbit, something about the shepherd's son falling into the pond last week. He claimed he was chasing geese, Everyone knows he was chasing the butcher's daughter. Your sister giggles and hides her face in the blanket. Historians often assume medieval peasants led purely grim, laborious lives, but the truth is always more textured. Scholars now acknowledge that storytelling, jokes, and nighttime conversation were vital parts of daily life, especially in winter when nights were long and days were short, and you needed something other than sore hands to carry you through. Conversation flows in waves. Sometimes it rises with a juicy tale, and everyone leans in. Other times, it ebbs, sinking into the quiet comfort of being in a room full of people who know your snores and secrets and still let you share the blanket. You glance at the candle. Its flame bends with the drafts, dancing slightly with each gust from the shuttered window. Candles are rare here. Not precious like spices, but not common either. You don't burn one unless there's a reason. Tonight, the reason is company. Your uncle is visiting, and that means at least one good story before the light runs out. He clears his throat. He's a man who knows his timing and says, "You want to hear about the one-eyed priest from Thornbridge?" Your brother groans. "Not again." But it's a mock protest. Everyone loves that story. Your uncle launches into the tale, equal parts myth and memory, about a priest who lost his eye in a duel with a goose. Or maybe it was a demon. The details shift with each telling. You lean in, even though you know every beat. The way he mimes the flapping wings, the shriek of surprise, the blessed wine spilling onto the floor. It all lands perfectly. And then there's a moment of silence afterward, the kind that glows a little inside your chest. No one says anything. You just sit there, bundled up, staring into the candle like it's a portal. This is the in-between time, when you're not asleep but not really awake either. When the cold feels distant, not because it's gone, but because you've forgotten to care for a little while. A quirky tradition some villagers believe in? Whispering secrets into the candle's flame. Not wishes, not prayers, just the small things you need to say, but can't share with another person. It's said that the flame burns them away before they can turn into burdens. You tried it once. Told the candle you hated your boots and sometimes wished you were a cat. No one ever found out. There's something sacred about these moments. The flicker of the flame, the quiet laughter, the safe glow of family packed in tight, like apples in a barrel. The way your sister leans her head against your shoulder without asking. The way your mother smiles to herself at something you didn't catch. The way your uncle quietly drapes his spare cloak over your cousin when he nods off mid-sentence. This isn't just gossip or stories. It's memory-making. It's connection. It's something to hold on to when the night gets cold again. And then, the candle gutters once, twice, and dies. Just like that, the room shifts. No more stories, no more whispers. You lie back down slowly. The fire is just a handful of coals now. The glow on the walls has vanished. All that remains is breath, soft, steady, shared. Historians still argue whether peasants had distinct concepts of leisure or free time the way we think of it now. But here, in the hush after the candle's death, you know this was leisure. This was joy. Quiet, handmade joy. You pull the blanket up to your chin, feeling the last heat fade from the hearth and the darkness settle fully over the cottage. The only light now comes from the occasional glow of the coals and the tiny slit of moon peeking through the shutter's crack. But inside you, there's still a flicker, the echo of the story, the warmth of the laughter. You close your eyes, still smiling. You wake up in the middle of the night, not groggy or confused, just awake. The room is quiet, but not dead quiet. There's always sound here, a low creak from the beams, the shuffle of someone rolling over, the occasional sleepy cough, and the soft pop of a log finally giving up its last bit of heat. You hear all of it, and yet your mind feels oddly alert, like someone flicked on a candle behind your eyes. This is normal. In fact, this moment has a name, though you wouldn't call it that. You just think of it as the space between. But modern historians have started referring to it as the first and second sleep, a medieval rhythm of rest that sounds strange to our modern ears, but to you, it's just what the night does. Your first sleep has already passed. That deep, heavy phase where the cold barely touches you. Your limbs forget they exist, and your brain slips into the sort of dreams where geese talk, and your cousin turns into a turnip. But then, like clockwork, your eyes open. No panic, no reason, just awake. And now comes the interlude. Your mother's still asleep, breathing slow and even. Your sister, curled like a comma beside you, twitches once in her sleep, mumbling something about shoes. The dog, still faithfully warming your feet, is snoring, very softly but with conviction. You lie there for a bit, staring at the ceiling's dark bones, thinking of nothing in particular, or maybe everything in particular. This is the hour when thoughts get weirdly poetic, not because you're trying to be, but because the world feels slowed, muffled, turned slightly inside out. You remember your uncle's story about the one-eyed priest. You wonder what it'd feel like to fly. You try to count how many days until spring. You lose track. Try again. Give up. Eventually, you stretch quietly, careful not to disturb the blanket hierarchy. You stand softly, slowly, slipping your feet into your shoes without lacing them. The floor is cold, but not toe-numbing. The fire has left behind a faint shimmer of heat in the hearthstone. You shuffle toward the door and open the shutter just a crack. The night air spills in like a ghost, smelling of frost, old wood, and the kind of silence that makes you feel very small and very lucky to be alive. The stars are brilliant. You don't look at them every night. Sometimes it's too cloudy, too cold. But tonight, they're fierce. Pinpricks of light in a wool-black sky. You spot the familiar constellations, the ones your father taught you when you were little. You mouth their names. Orion, the plough. That one that's probably not a bear, but always gets called a bear. It's so quiet, so still. You could believe time has stopped. This is when the world breathes. A quirky custom you've heard from an older neighbour. She wakes during this hour to whisper to the dead. She says they're easier to hear between sleeps. You tried once, whispered to your grandmother. Didn't hear anything, but the air did feel different for a moment. Heavy and kind. You tiptoe back toward the hearth. There's just enough light from the coals to see the pot hanging above them, still warm. You reach for a cup and dip it into the pot. Lukewarm broth, mostly water now, but it has that comforting oniony aftertaste. You sip it slowly, both hands wrapped around the cup like it's a secret. You're not the only one awake. Your cousin across the room shifts upright too. No words exchanged, just a nod. He pulls his coat around himself and leans against the wall. You sit near him in companionable silence, both of you chewing your thoughts slowly, like a crust of stale bread. This pause between sleeps is when things get said or done. You've seen people mend clothing, twist thread, sharpen knives, pray, or, when the moon is high and madness is near, sneak off into the woods, not for fun, for deals, for secrets. You pretend not to know. Some say the body needs this break in the night, that 2 sleeps are better than 1. Historians still argue whether this broken pattern was natural or conditioned by life without artificial light, but you don't really care what scholars in long coats say. For you, it just is. You glance at your cousin again. He finally speaks, voice hoarse and soft. Think the frost will break this week? You shrug. Maybe. He grunts. Would be nice. And that's it. That's the whole conversation. Enough said. After a little while, you begin to feel the sleep coming back. Slow and syrupy, like warm porridge climbing your spine. Your limbs grow heavy. Your eyelids follow. You whisper a good night to no one in particular and crawl back under the blanket, slipping your feet around the dog, who grumbles but accepts your intrusion. The straw rustles. The fire breathes once more. This time, your sleep is lighter, dreamier, less a plunge, more afloat. You dream of green fields, fat bees, sun-warmed stone, and bread, warm from the oven. You're not sure if you've even tasted real fresh bread, but your dream self insists you have, and it's glorious. Outside, the stars begin to fade. Inside, your body sinks again, this time into second sleep. You're dreaming about warm feet. Not shoes, those are for the fortunate. Not boots, which are still damp from yesterday's slush, but actual warm feet. Your own, specifically. Dream. You is walking barefoot through a meadow, grass cool and pleasant, toes wiggling freely. Then, splash, you step in something cold. And just like that, you're awake. The dream warmth evaporates instantly, replaced by a cold so sharp it's personal. Your feet are frozen. Again. You pull your legs up and ball them against your chest, trying to thaw them with your knees. But there's a problem. You need to go. Not in the let's take a scenic walk to admire the moonlight sense. Number. This is business. Urgent, awkward, and immediate. You have to pee. You lie very still, eyes open, weighing your options. If you move, you lose every scrap of heat your blanket's been hoarding. If you don't, well, that's a different risk. You glance toward the hearth, where the faintest ember glow remains. Not much light, but enough to spot the object of your mission. The chamber pot. It's not glamorous. It's not even technically clean. But in the middle of winter, it's a necessity. There's no running water, no outhouse dash unless you fancy losing a toe or two to frostbite. The chamber pot is the medieval answer to midnight emergencies. You throw off the blanket with the resignation of a condemned prisoner and feel the air punch your skin. Your knees ache. Your feet complain. The floor is cold enough to qualify as an enemy. The chamber pot, a squat clay vessel near the wall, is already half full. That makes you hesitate. There's a certain level of trust involved in squatting over a pot in a room full of sleeping relatives, all of whom are within snoring distance. You move carefully, quietly, avoiding any sudden sounds. A clang here, and you'll have an audience. A quirky old belief floats through your mind. Your aunt once told you not to pee after midnight without whispering an apology to the house spirits. They get offended, she said. You think it's probably nonsense, but just in case you mumble, sorry, under your breath. Mission accomplished, you tiptoe back toward your bed. The floorboards creak in a way that makes your soul wince. You step over your brother's leg, avoid the dog's tail, and ease back under the blanket, like a burglar returning a stolen treasure. But now, you're wide awake. And worse, your toes are colder than ever. You reach down and discover why. Your socks are damp. Not wet exactly, just the special kind of cold that fabric achieves when it's been soaked, frozen, and then left to exist in its own melancholy. You peel them off and hold them near your face. Mistake. They smell like a goat's regrets. You throw them toward the fire and immediately hear the hiss as they land too close to a coal. You'll deal with that in the morning. Now comes the real challenge. How to fall asleep again without your socks, without your dignity, and with a rapidly cooling backside. Medieval peasants didn't have thermal layers or heated blankets, but they did have wool socks, or at least something resembling them. Thick, itchy tubes, sometimes made from felted scraps, often mended within an inch of their lives. You remember when your mother made your current pair. She sat by the fire, muttering curses under her breath as she re-stitched a heel for the third time. They weren't pretty, but they were yours. Historians still puzzle over just how sophisticated peasant knitwear was. Some argue that true knitting wasn't widespread until later centuries, but evidence of knoll binding and crude looped socks goes back centuries. Whatever the technique, the goal was simple: keep your toes alive. Without your socks, you improvise. You wrap your feet in part of the blanket, wedge them between your thighs, and hope for a miracle. You contemplate asking your sister to share a bit more of the covering, but last time you did that, she kicked you in her sleep and muttered something about hedgehogs. You decide against it. As you lie there shivering gently, another thought hits you. Someone's going to have to empty the pot in the morning. You hope it isn't you. It probably will be. It's an underrated horror, taking that sloshing clay nightmare out to the compost pit behind the house while your face freezes and your fingers threaten to snap. You nearly dropped it once. Never ran faster in your life. You still wake up thinking about that near disaster. The pot survived. Barely. You roll onto your side, trying to find the warmest part of the mattress, still faintly heated from earlier, and bury your face in the blanket. The fire crackles once, a sympathetic sound. You mutter something back at it. You're not sure what. Possibly a prayer. Possibly just a whimper. Eventually, your heartbeat slows. Your breathing softens. Your toes ache a little less. The wool, now wrapped 3 times around your legs, begins to do its job. And before long, you find yourself drifting. The pot sits where you left it. The fire glows low. The socks steam faintly, drying beside the hearth like small defeated flags. You sleep again. No dreams this time. Just rest. When you wake this time, it's to the faintest suggestion of light, the kind that doesn't quite illuminate but lets you know the dark is losing. A soft grey presses through the cracks in the shutters, diffusing into the room like chilled breath. It's morning, sort of. At least it's as close as you're going to get during the heart of winter. You stay still for a while, listening. No wind today. That's the first miracle. The shutters aren't rattling. The thatch isn't groaning under snow weight, and no snowdrift has crept in under the door. Yet. There's still cold, though, the kind that has weight. It lies on your chest and numbs your fingers even under layers of wool and body heat. You shift slightly. The dog is gone. Off to inspect the morning pot situation, probably. Your brother's elbow is where your ribs should be. Your sister's hair is in your mouth. All normal. But there's no call to rise. Not yet. Because winter doesn't play by the same schedule as the rest of the year. Welcome to the slow season. In spring and summer, dawn means movement. The cock crows. And you're up, hauling water, collecting eggs, scraping soot off everything in reach. But winter is different. The sun rises late and hesitantly, like a guest who isn't sure they're wanted. You don't wake so much as you thaw. Slowly, grumpily, with many false starts. Historians have long debated just how much work was done during the medieval winter months. Some believed peasants remained busy year-round, finding endless tasks indoors. Others suggest a more flexible rhythm. Fewer daylight hours, slower pace, a period of necessary rest. You, from beneath your scratchy blanket, definitely vote for the second interpretation. Outside, the village is still. No footsteps yet, no distant bleat from the fields. Just the creak of beams settling as the frost eases its grip. You roll onto your back and stare at the ceiling where smoke stains trace the line of the rafters. You've memorized those patterns. You even gave them names when you were younger. That one above your head. St. Agnes on a donkey. Still looks like it, oddly. It's easy to lose track of time in winter. The days blend, smudged together like charcoal sketches in a book. Work slows. Chores condense into bursts of necessity between stretches of inactivity. You feed animals, gather what little wood you can, mend whatever's been torn, and then you wait. You wait for warmth, for sun, for some reason to move beyond the fire's reach. You remember your father once saying, Winter is the only time a peasant is allowed to think. Not plan. Not really. Just think. About the field, the year, the price of grain, whether the priest was looking at him funny during the last sermon. Today might be a laundry day. Not actual washing, of course. The water barrel is frozen, and hauling buckets from the stream involves more prayer than effort. But today, your mother might hang things near the fire to dry and beat the dust out of the rest, if the smoke isn't too thick. You smell something new now, not food, not fire, air, fresh air, faint but distinct, slipping through the shutter. It smells like distant hay and something almost metallic. Frost evaporating. Your mother stirs, murmurs something half prayer, half grumble, and starts the ritual of morning movement. The fire's coals are nudged, a log is added, the spark catches, the hearth begins to breathe again. Your father follows, stretching with audible pops. Still cold, he announces, as though someone might argue. The day begins, not with bells, not with schedules, but with light. Weak light. Cold light. But it's there. You finally sit up, blanket clinging like a jealous cat. You look around. The dog is, in fact, inspecting the pot. Your brother is pretending to still be asleep. Your sister is up, kneeling beside the hearth, hands outstretched toward the tiny flame like a supplicant at an altar. No one speaks much. Winter mornings aren't for talking. They're for adjusting. You rub your arms, then your feet, trying to coax life back into them. Your socks, rescued from the fire's edge, are drier now, though one smells vaguely of ash. You pull them on anyway. There are no spares. You think of them not as clothing, but as survival artifacts. A fringe folk saying echoes in your mind. Something your grandmother used to mutter, "In summer, the rooster owns the hour. In winter, the fire does." And it's true, you don't measure time by sun or clocks. You measure it by firelight, how bright it is, how low it gets when it needs feeding. You peek out the shutter for a moment. The village is blanketed in white, every roof wearing a cap of snow, smoke curling lazily from chimneys where there's something left to burn. The path is barely visible, just a dent where feet have passed days before. No fresh tracks. You close it quickly. That's enough sky for now. Today, you might help your father mend a fence if the sun stays long enough, or help patch the wall where the draft is worst, or help your mother stir the mash for the pig. Or maybe you'll just sit by the fire, listening to the stories the floorboards tell and the wind repeats, waiting, like the rest of the world, for spring to tap you on the shoulder. The morning is still here. The fire is lit. The roof hasn't caved in. You call that a good start. Your hands are stiff again. Even near the fire, they feel like they've been soaking in a bucket of icy porridge. You rub them together slowly, watching the skin pull tight over your knuckles. Your nails are black at the edges, not with dirt, though there's plenty of that, but from the cold creeping into the very ends of you. You try flexing your fingers a few times, and that's when your mother notices. She doesn't say anything, but she moves to the wall, pulls down a little pouch tied with cord, and tosses it to you. You catch it, just barely, and open it to find the same thing that's always in there. A few dried herbs, a clove of garlic, and a thick salve that smells like wet moss and old cheese. "Rub it on your hands," she says, already back to poking the fire. "Don't eat it this time." You're insulted. That only happened once. It looked like butter. This fragrant mess is one of your village's winter weapons, the local healer's cold weather cure-all, half tradition, half desperation. The ingredients change depending on who mixed it, but they always smell strong, always stain your tunic, and always seem to work just enough that you stop complaining. You smear the stuff onto your fingers. It's greasy, and the smell punches you right in the sinuses. Sharp, herbal, definitely not edible. It warms your hands though, slightly, and it masks the scent of last night's socks, still lurking in the air. Welcome to the wonderful world of medieval folk remedies. If you can't afford a physician, and you absolutely can't, you rely on what's local. Which means your knowledge base includes a fair bit of hearsay, some church-approved healing lore, and a generous helping of superstition. You remember your grandmother once stuck sliced onions in her boots to cure a chest cough, said the onion pulled out the poison. You never saw any actual poison, but she claimed her feet felt better. You didn't argue. Your sister's go-to cold remedy? Hot beer. Not exactly medicine, but she claims a mug by the fire can chase off chills faster than prayers. You've tried it. The warmth is real. The flavour, less so. Some of the cures border on the bizarre. One local widow insists on smearing badger fat across her forehead every time it snows. Claims it keeps the spirits away. She hasn't caught a chill in years. And while you're not ready to rub animal grease on your face, you have to admit, results are results. Historians note that peasant medicine in the medieval period was a mashup of empirical trial and error, oral tradition, and ecclesiastical regulation. While many remedies had some grounding in herbal knowledge, others were a little more improvised. Take the ever-popular garlic sock technique. Feeling feverish? Stuff your hose with crushed garlic and sleep with them on. You did it once. Your feet smelled like an entire market stall, and the dog wouldn't come near you for 3 days. But the cough did go away. And then there's the dreaded mustard plaster. Just the phrase makes you wince. It involves crushed mustard seed, flour, and vinegar, mixed into a paste and smeared across your chest, or back, to draw out the cold. What it actually does is burn, deeply. But your uncle swears by it. If it doesn't sting, it's not working, he always says. You've considered putting it in his boots more than once. Your family isn't without its skeptics, though. Your father, for one, swears most of these cures are just excuses to avoid work. You know what keeps the cold away, he grumbles as he sharpens a blade near the door. Digging trenches, building fences, carrying logs, not sitting around sniffing sage and vinegar. You think he has a point, but then again, he does wear a little charm tied around his wrist all winter. Just a bit of carved bone strung on a leather cord. He says it's from a soldier he knew once. Protects against frostbite. He'll never call it magic, of course. Just something that works. Sure, Dad. Sure. You glance down at your hands. The salve's still oily, but they move easier now. You flex your fingers and let the scent waft up. Still terrible. Still kind of wonderful. Somewhere behind you, your cousin sneezes, loud and dramatic. Your mother doesn't even look up. Put a cabbage leaf on it, she mutters. That's her other favourite. The cabbage cure. Cold in your chest? Lay cabbage leaves on it. Headache? Tie them around your temples. Aching joints. Cabbage. Toothache? That's a harder sell, but she'll still try. You've heard of other villages using hot bricks wrapped in cloth, steaming herbs in pots, and even singing certain psalms backward to ease a sore throat. That last one sounds risky. The priest would probably faint. Historians still argue whether these remedies were symbolic or practical, whether they provided psychological relief more than physical healing. But for you, it's simpler. If the stinky salve takes the sting out of your hands, you'll smear it on every day until spring sings its first bird call. The air shifts again, colder now. The fire pops. Outside, someone's walking past the cottage. You hear the crunch of boots in snow and the clink of a bucket. Probably the miller. He's always up too early, which is why he always has that slightly haunted look. You reach for a hunk of dry bread near the hearth, chew slowly, and think of the healer down the road. Her belt covered in little pouches, her breath always smelling like fennel and smoke. She once gave you a potion for winter coughs that tasted like honey, pine, and regret. You're convinced it was at least 30% alcohol. But it worked, and that's all that matters. By the time the sun's high enough to light the room in earnest, what little of it makes it past the frost-glazed shutters, the chores are well underway. Fire's been fed. Bread's been eaten, or what passed for bread. The pig's been shouted at for knocking over a bucket. Again, you're wrapping yourself in your cloak, preparing to fetch more firewood, when your sister blurts out, "Don't whistle." You freeze mid-step. "Why not?" you ask, already regretting the question. She drops her voice like she's about to tell you the village's darkest secret. Because it calls things. Right. Of course. She's dead serious. She always is about this sort of thing. Superstitions are as common as fleas around here and far harder to get rid of. She doesn't look scared, though. More like she's repeating a rule she didn't invent, but absolutely believes. You open the door anyway, stepping into a gust of air that slices across your face like a butter knife made of ice. No whistle escapes you now. Your lips freeze shut on contact with the outside. The path to the woodpile is uneven and slick. You shuffle your way there, head down, fingers inside your sleeves, and your sister's voice still bouncing around your brain. Don't whistle. It calls things. That's just the tip of the iceberg, pun very much intended, when it comes to winter superstitions in your village. There's a whole rule book for this time of year, and no one actually knows where half of it came from. But it's observed with the kind of quiet reverence normally reserved for saints' bones or unusually fresh eggs. Don't sweep after sunset. It stirs up spirits. Don't look at your reflection in icy water. It'll steal your face for the rest of the season. Don't go to sleep with a full bucket of water inside the house. No one ever explains why, but everyone agrees it's very bad luck. Historians still debate how seriously peasants took these beliefs. Some argue they were just inherited rituals, passed down without question. Others believe these superstitions served a real purpose, to explain and control the chaos of a world where frost could kill and a failed harvest might mean starvation. For you, it's more about rhythm. You follow the customs because that's what people do. Not out of fear, but because winter is long, and rules, no matter how strange, give structure to a season that otherwise feels endless. You reach the woodpile and start stacking split logs into your arms, moving quickly. The sun's barely up, and already your fingers are numb again. You work faster, partly to warm up, and partly to avoid whatever it is your sister thinks might hear you if you happen to hum a tune. Last week, someone claimed they saw a will-o'-the-wisp in the forest just beyond the fields, just a flickering light, darting between trees. The baker said it was just swamp gas. The widow said it was the soul of someone buried without a proper candle. The priest said it was God testing our faith. You said nothing, but you checked the door 3 times that night. Then there's old man Jory's tale of the midnight skater. Supposedly, if you hear scraping on the frozen pond past midnight, just after the cock crows twice, it's not the wind, it's him. Skating in a circle, faster and faster, until the ice opens and swallows him whole. If you see him, don't run, don't look away, just blink once, then go back to bed. You've never tested that theory, and you never go near the pond in winter unless someone dares you. Even then, you demand witnesses, preferably armed. Back in the house, you set the logs beside the hearth and stamp the snow from your boots. Your sister eyes you suspiciously, as if checking for signs of spectral attachment. You give her a look that says nothing whistled, nothing followed. She looks only half convinced. Later that day, your cousin visits, red-cheeked and wide-eyed. Says the woman down the road saw a white hare in the garden. That's no ordinary animal, obviously. Everyone knows a white hare in winter is a bad omen. Might be a witch in disguise. Might be a spirit. Might just mean a cold snap's coming. Either way, you don't touch it. Don't look it in the eyes, and definitely don't try to feed it. A quirky tradition related to this. Your grandmother always put out a bowl of milk on the windowsill on nights when the temperature dropped below freezing. For the spirits, she'd say, so they pass us by. The milk always froze solid. Whether that meant success or insult was never made clear. That night, just before bed, your mother walks around the house 3 times. You watch her through the shutter. 1 full circle, cloak pulled tight, muttering under her breath. You ask her why. She says it's to tie the night shut. Your uncle laughs when he hears it. Nonsense, he says. The only thing that keeps the cold out is bricks and wool. But you notice he rubs his charm 3 times before sleeping. Just like always. Even the priest has his customs. He says they're not superstition, they're rituals. Blessing the hearth, sprinkling salt in the corners, lighting candles on the feast days of obscure saints with names that sound like someone sneezed while sneezing. You're told to believe these are for protection, not luck. But the line between the two gets pretty thin when your windows rattle at midnight. Historians still argue whether the line between religion and superstition ever truly existed for medieval peasants. The church tried to keep them separate. But out here, far from any bishop's scowl, the Virgin Mary and the bog hag often occupy the same mental real estate. You don't question it. You just wrap the garlic around your wrist, place the candle stub on the windowsill, and sleep with 1 foot under the dog, because warmth and warding off shadow beasts, double win. You're not sure you believe in the rules, but you follow them, because deep down, when the wind is howling and the night's too long and the fire's too low, you start to wonder if maybe your sister was right. Maybe it does cool things. You wake up, but something's wrong. It's too quiet. Not the usual quiet, the thick, sleepy kind that wraps around you like wool. This is different. Hollow. Still. You sit up slowly. The fire's out. The hearth is cold. The coals didn't make it through the night. That happens sometimes, especially when someone forgets the last feeding, or when there just isn't enough wood. But even the cold feels sharper than usual, like it's coming from inside you, not just outside. You glance around the room. No movement, no soft breathing, no shuffle of limbs or dog stretch or someone mumbling in their sleep. Just shapes, still and tucked tight under blankets. Except for one. Your grandfather's form doesn't move. Your mother is already beside him, kneeling. Her hand is on his chest, still. Not checking anymore. Just resting there. Like she's saying goodbye through skin and cloth. You know before anyone says it. He's gone. The air feels thinner, like the room itself has exhaled and hasn't bothered to breathe back in. Your sister is sitting upright now, holding the blanket over her mouth. Your cousin looks like he might be sick. No one cries yet. Not out loud. Because when someone dies in winter, you grieve differently. Grief here is as much about logistics as emotion. The dead don't wait. The cold doesn't care. There are things that must happen, fast. Blankets to reclaim, a body to clean, plans to make. It's not that you don't feel it, you do. But the feelings get packed up like everything else in winter, wrapped tight, stored low, and pulled out only when you have the space for them. Historians often describe medieval death as a regular part of life. And it was. Especially in villages like yours. People didn't whisper about death. They folded it into the day like a sour bit of dough, part of the mix. But that doesn't mean it didn't hurt. You get up, moving slowly, limbs thick with cold and dread. You kneel beside your mother, placing your hand beside hers. Your grandfather's skin is already cool. Not stiff yet, just cool. Like marble left outside. There's a hush in the room now. Not silence, reverence. Your father lights a candle, one of the good ones, and places it at the head of the mat. Not for warmth, for tradition, for spirit. It's said that the flame lights the way, helps the soul find its path. Whether to heaven or home again is anyone's guess. A quirky village belief. When someone dies in winter, you must open a window, just a crack, so the spirit can leave. Otherwise, it lingers, gets stuck, brings sickness to those who stay. Your sister rushes to do it without being asked. She looks scared. You don't blame her. The cold rushes in immediately, biting at your toes. You grit your teeth. It doesn't matter. The air needs to move now, so the soul can pass. You don't pray out loud. You don't have to. The room is a prayer. Someone brings water, frozen on top, but usable. Your mother dips a cloth and begins to clean his hands, not roughly, carefully. She wipes each finger as if cataloguing them, remembering how they used to shell peas, carry logs, bless the bread. Your grandfather's fingers were strong, wrinkled like old bark, the kind that only trees and men get after long winters. Your cousin leaves to fetch the priest. He'll come. He always does, even in snow. Your grandmother used to say, when someone dies in the cold, their breath leaves before their spirit does. You're not sure what that means, but you understand it. The kind of understanding that doesn't need logic. You sit back on your heels. You're not sure what to feel. He was old, very old, older than the roof probably. He'd been coughing since the first frost. The healer came, said it was a chest chill, gave him bitter tea. He drank it, said it tasted like disappointment. Then he laughed. That was 2 days ago. You think of his stories, half-truths, whole lies, and the occasional wisdom tucked like raisins in hard bread. He once told you that winter was the season that teaches you who's listening. You didn't know what that meant until today. Historians still argue whether peasant communities were desensitized to death or held tighter rituals because of it. You'd say, both. You don't cry right now, not because you don't care, but because crying has a place. Right now, isn't it? There are too many things to do. He'll be buried soon. Within a day, if the ground isn't too frozen. If it is, they'll place him in the charnel house, or perhaps just keep him in the cool shed with herbs tucked into his sleeves until the earth softens. You've seen it done before. The priest will bless him. The family will sing. Someone will tell a story that makes your father snort and your sister roll her eyes. Then you'll return home, light another candle, and eat something hot if you can. And maybe later you'll cry. Or maybe you'll just sit by the fire and whisper the stories he used to tell. About the rooster that wore shoes. Or the knight who got stuck in a tree and had to be rescued by a cow. You'll remember those stories long after you forget the sound of his voice. And that's its own kind of grief. The candle flickers now, its flames small but sure. Outside, snow begins to fall again. Soft, fine flakes that land with barely a sound. You watch one settle on the open windowsill and melt. Just one. Then you close the shutter. The day after a death feels longer than usual, though no one says it aloud. There's work to be done, but it moves slower, more out of habit than urgency. The animals still need feeding. The fire still needs coaxing back to life. Your stomach still growls right on schedule. Life, as unfair as it often is, continues. But today is not for mourning in silence. Today is for remembrance. And, surprisingly, feasting. Because winter doesn't just bring loss and bitter frost and stiff fingers. It also brings something far older and deeper. Holy nights. Feast days. The kind of communal rituals that pierce the gloom like a candle in a dark chapel. Today is the feast of St. Bryce. Or maybe it's the eve of St. Wulfstan, depending on which calendar you're using and which priest you ask. The saints come one after the other in winter, like a holy parade, each with their own customs, dishes, and slightly questionable backstories involving wolves, snow, and miraculous potatoes. Your mother is already stirring something in the pot, a rare mixture. Grains, yes, as always, but also dried fruit, real fruit, Raisins soaked in ale, plumped up like soft coins. Someone must have been saving them, or bartered something important. The scent fills the air, warmer and sweeter than your nose remembers. It's like being hugged by a memory. Feasting in winter is less about plenty and more about permission. Permission to pause, to gather, to laugh, to use the good flour. Historians agree, while most medieval days were defined by hard labour and sparse meals, feast days interrupted that rhythm. Not lavish by royal standards, but for peasants, these were festivals of survival. Little declarations that you'd made it this far. You feel it in the house today. A subtle lift in posture. A flicker of something in your father's tired eyes. Your sister has combed her hair. The dog's been brushed. Even the pig has been given a handful of dried peas, though she snorted like it was beneath her. The table, really just a wide plank on barrels, is cleared and scrubbed. A candle is lit. Your mother mumbles a few words, part prayer, part recipe. Outside, the snow has softened. No howling wind. No sharp blasts under the door. Just fat flakes drifting down like feathers, unbothered and slow. As more family trickles in, the house fills, boots stomping off frost, voices greeting, shoulders being clapped. Even in grief they come, especially in grief. This is what people do. They show up. Someone brings a jug of weak wine, mulled with spice if you squint hard enough and have a generous nose. Another cousin brings bread, dense, dark, and surprisingly warm. You bite into it and taste cloves and pepper. Your eyes water a little. Could be the spice, could be something else. Then come the songs. Not hymns, not tonight. These are winter songs, passed down like wooden spoons, sung with cracking voices and off-key harmonies. One is about a fox stealing eggs in the snow. Another is a ballad to Saint Agnes, who apparently tamed a bear and made soup in a glacier. You've never questioned the details. Why start now? You join in. Because that's what you do. Even if your throat is dry and your heart still feels like it's wearing a heavy cloak. You sing, and the room joins you. And suddenly, the cottage doesn't feel quite as cold. A fringe tradition revived just for today. Someone pulls out the cider apple. Not a real fruit, just a carved wooden apple passed from hand to hand. Whoever holds it has to share a tale from last winter. Something funny, or foolish, or slightly scandalous. Your turn comes. You hold the apple, worn smooth by years of grip, and clear your throat. I once tried to sled down the sheep hill using my uncle's shield. Laughter, a few snorts. I ended up in the pond, broke the shield, lost a boot. The goose chased me for 3 days. More laughter. Even your mother chuckles, and she really liked that shield. You pass the apple on. Someone else shares a story about catching snow in their underpants while fixing the thatch. Another tells a tale of kissing under the mistletoe, and discovering it was actually dried cabbage. These moments, silly, warm, noisy, are how you patch the cracks. Not with denial, but with celebration. Not for what was lost, but for what remains. Historians still wonder whether peasant feast days were sacred or secular, spiritual devotion or survival strategy. You'd argue they were both. Faith and food, song and sorrow, all kneaded together like the holiday bread, coarse, uneven, but enough. Later, someone brings out the cake. It's not what you'd call sweet by modern standards, but it has honey and nuts and more raisins. You eat it slowly, savouring each sticky bite like it might be your last. And maybe it will be. Or maybe not. Maybe next week you'll be singing again. This time for the feast of St. Vincent, the patron of wine and moderately decent weather. You'll be dancing in a circle with numb toes and a full belly. You'll be whispering jokes into the dog's ear. Tonight the fire burns strong. The food sits warm in your belly. The voices rise like smoke, rich and full. And your grandfather? His cloak hangs on the peg by the door. No one's moved it. No one will, not yet. But you think he'd like tonight. The laughter, the singing, the way the air doesn't feel quite so heavy. The night, for once, doesn't feel endless. It feels full. You wake slowly, but not gently. Your nose is the first to complain. It's cold, so cold, in fact, that your first breath crackles. Actual crackles. You open your eyes and see your own breath curling above you, like a spirit trying to escape. The roof above your head is glistening faintly. Not with water, there's no such luxury today, but with frost. Inside the house, you groan and sit up, pulling your blanket around your shoulders like a shroud. Then you hear it, the sound of ice being cracked. Someone's already up and dealing with the water bucket. You shuffle toward the hearth. No fire yet, just grey coals, sulking and dead. You crouch beside them, trying to find warmth in the memory of flames. It's like hugging yesterday. Then you look at the bucket. The surface is frozen, thickly. Not just a skim of ice, but the kind of crust that makes a knife necessary. Your father is holding that very knife, using the tip to crack through. You watch as he chips away, revealing the murky slush beneath. And this is how the day begins. Frozen water is a reality now. It's not an inconvenience. It's a defining feature of your morning. You need that water for cooking, for drinking, for cleaning the pot from last night's feast. Or maybe not cleaning it. Maybe just reusing it and calling the crust seasoning. Historians agree, during hard winters, even water inside the home could freeze. Peasants often kept buckets near the hearth, but when the fire died and temperatures dropped, it didn't matter how close to the flame you were. Ice won the argument. You pick up your shoes from where you left them near the wall and shake them. Icy dust falls out. You sigh, then shove your feet in. They crunch. Your shoes just crunched. Wool socks do what they can. But even the best pair, patched, stretched, and vaguely resembling mittens for ogres, won't stop a boot full of snowmelt from turning your toes into meat popsicles. You once heard someone say that peasants got used to it, that their bodies adapted. You'd like to meet that person. You'd like to introduce them to your left foot, which has been numb since Epiphany. The morning chore queue begins. Your sister's already shaking out the sleeping mats, each one stiff as parchment. The straw inside has clumped together, frozen in awkward angles. You can't fluff it. You have to thaw it. A project for later. Your job, carrying water from the stream. You glance out the window and feel your soul shrink. The snow is shin deep and utterly uninviting. You don't want to go. You never do. But you're next on the rotation. So you wrap a scarf around your face, double knot your cloak, and brace yourself. Outside, the world is quiet and white. The kind of quiet that hums in your ears, that makes you feel like the only person left alive. The path to the stream is already packed with footprints, some fresh, some ghostly with snow. Each breath stings, your teeth ache, your eyes water. You try to imagine you're in a winter wonderland, a festive postcard. That helps for about 4 seconds. By the time you reach the stream, your fingers are stiff, even inside your mitts. The water is moving, but only just. A thin layer of ice coats the edges, and your breath fogs the surface as you lean down. You crack the ice, fill the buckets. Try not to tip them. Try not to tip yourself. Then you carry the water home, arms shaking, shoulders screaming. By the time you reach the door, your cloak is dusted white, and your ears feel like someone tried to pickle them. Your reward? Tepid stew, reheated over a lazy fire. You don't complain. You dip your bread in it and pretend it's soup from a golden goblet. Back inside, the house is showing the full effects of the freeze. A mug left near the wall is now a mugsicle. A pair of boots didn't dry properly and now stand frozen in time like a still life called despair. A quirky detail you've come to accept: frozen bed linens. The edges, where they touch the wall, are literally rimmed with frost. It's both hilarious and horrifying. You slap them a few times, as though that'll fix anything. It doesn't, but it feels good to hit something. Your sister is poking at the fire with a stick that used to be a spoon. She holds her hands out, palms red and chapped. She mutters something about Saint Sebastian and frozen toes. You join her, holding your own hands to the meager heat. This is when you both play a game. How many fingers can I feel? Today's answer is 6 out of 10. Not bad. Historians still argue whether peasants in colder climates ever achieved true warmth indoors. Some say that sleeping bodies and animals kept it tolerable. Others argue that the interiors were still bitterly cold, just less cold than outside. You can confirm it's less cold, but still very, very cold. You remember once seeing a nobleman's house, far off, just the edge of a manor, visible during a festival. Smoke billowed from actual chimneys, and glass windows glinted in the sun. You imagined they had a room that stayed warm all day, maybe even a bath. But here? Here you pray for a patch of sun through the shutter and thank the fire when it decides to stay awake. And when your feet stop hurting, that's when you really worry, because that means they've gone numb. And numb is the step before missing. Even the dog isn't playful today. She's curled under a bench, nose tucked into her belly, tail wrapped around her paws. A dog burrito. The pig, on the other hand, is doing fine. Her breath clouds the air in bursts, and she squeals whenever the fire sparks. She doesn't seem bothered by the cold. You begin to wonder if pigs are just built differently. Your mother hands you a pair of mittens, fur-lined. You blink. Where did she get these? You ask. They were your grandfather's, she says. He'd want you to use them. You pull them on. They're too big, the fingers awkward and thick, but oh, warmth. Not just warmth, memory warmth. You wiggle your fingers inside them and feel like you've been handed armor. Later, when the light starts to fade, you'll huddle close to the fire again. You'll lay out your damp socks like sacred offerings. You'll press your hands to the pig's side for a moment, just to feel something real. And when you slip into bed, you'll whisper to yourself, maybe tomorrow won't be as cold. Because it might not be. And because hope, like frost, spreads best at night. The light fades fast this time of year, slipping away like a shy guest. You blink, and suddenly the day is over. Again. The shadows stretch long across the straw-strewn floor, and the room fills with the quiet sounds of evening prep. Blankets shaken, fire poked, cloaks folded and stuffed into cracks in the wall to keep out the wind. The dog's already claimed her spot, circling it with all the ceremony of a minor queen before flopping down and sighing like she's held the world together all day. And amid it all, in the middle of the settling, the children start to hum. It begins softly, almost too low to notice. Just a tune, a lullaby, a breath of a melody passed down from who knows where. You don't even realize it's happening until you hear your younger cousin singing to her ragged cloth doll, her voice wobbly but sweet. This is the part of the night that doesn't get talked about in the village records, the bedtime rituals of medieval peasant children. But they're real, and they matter. Maybe even more than the firewood or the porridge. Because sleep doesn't come easy in a house like this. It has to be invited. So the songs begin. Little tunes with nonsense words, or verses about cats and kings and birds who forgot how to fly. No one wrote them down. They live in breath and memory, kept alive by repetition and warmth. You smile as the melody makes its way through the room. It's not organized, not in harmony, just one voice here, another there, blending into the crackle of the fire, Your sister joins in, off-key but confident. Your mother hums a counter rhythm while folding an extra blanket. There's a game your brother starts sometimes, one passed down through generations of sleep-deprived kids. He tosses a nut or pebble into the air and tries to catch it behind his back. If he drops it, he has to recite a riddle. If he catches it, everyone else has to stay quiet for 10 full seconds, which to a child feels like a century. Naturally, he always drops it. You join in, not because you love the game, but because you know what comes after. The stories. Children's stories are different than the ones told at gossip hour. These are shorter, simpler, but not gentler. There's the one about the girl who wandered into the woods and came back with frost for bones. The one about the mouse who outsmarted a bear using only a turnip and a shoe. And the one your grandfather used to tell about the stars being holes poked into the sky, so the souls of the dead could peek in and make sure you were tucked in properly. That one always made you check the window. Historians speculate that medieval children may have gone to bed early, rising with the adults at first light. But what's clear is that they had their own world, their own rhythm. And in winter, that rhythm wrapped tightly around bedtime. A quirky tradition some families keep. Before sleep, each child says the name of their guardian. Not a saint, not a parent. Their bed guardian, a made-up protector, imagined into being through years of repetition. Your brother's is named Butterstick. He wears a hat and is deeply suspicious of cats. Your cousin has a guardian called Elm Foot, who smells like cinnamon and only speaks in riddles. You don't know where these names come from. They just are. And when spoken aloud, they settle like a second blanket over small shoulders. There's also the matter of night tokens, little treasures or objects each child must have nearby. A twig with strange markings, a rock that looks vaguely like a face, a bit of red yarn from a holiday cloak. These things don't do anything, but if they're missing, sleep is impossible. You know this. You've tried. Tonight, your sister clutches a dried flower she's flattened between two scraps of parchment. Your cousin wears a bracelet made from pig bristle and string. Your brother has a feather tucked behind his ear. He says it helps him float into sleep. You've never seen him float, but it sounds nice. You lie down and feel the weight of the day leave you, one ache at a time. The fire's still going, low but steady. The walls no longer creak from cold. They just exist, holding in whatever warmth they've earned. The children are quiet now, their rituals complete. They've been sung to, spoken over, tickled, tucked, and negotiated into stillness. A few are already snoring softly. One breathes like a tiny bellows. Another drools a little onto their blanket. Classic. You watch them and feel something warm flicker inside you. Not from the fire. This warmth is older, deeper. The kind that comes from seeing small things survive in a hard world. You remember being that small. You remember clinging to your own night token, singing the same strange tune to yourself until you believed it was sacred. And now you pass it on. You close your eyes, the fire's red glow still painting your lids. The children sleep. The dog shifts. The wind outside has given up. And tomorrow will be the same. Songs and snow and someone dropping the nut again. But for now, in this quiet room, lit only by embers and breath, they dream, and so do you. Your breath fogs in the air the moment you wake. Not thick fog, just a soft swirl, like a puff of steam escaping your chest. It's still cold, of course. Cold enough that your first thought is not good morning, but where is my blanket and who stole it? You find it, eventually, balled up at the foot of the mat, held hostage by your brother, who has somehow cocooned himself inside it like a smug little caterpillar. You debate yanking it back, but you're too tired. And besides, the night's nearly over. You shift and listen. The fire is nothing now, just ashes and memory. Outside, the wind hums low, lazy but present. Still winter, still the same sky, but something is different. You notice it in the light first. It isn't the thin, stingy dawn you've come to expect. It's warmer, slightly more golden. It creeps in through the cracks in the shutter and spills across the floor with just a hint of promise. You sit up and realize your toes, wrapped in wool, don't feel like icicles. They feel neutral, not warm, but not on the verge of death either. You stretch. Your joints pop like twigs underfoot. You glance out the window and feel it in your chest. The light has changed. It's still winter. You know that. The snow is still piled high. The roof still carries a fringe of icicles, and your breath still curls like a ghost. But deep in your bones, something stirs. This is the season's turn. Spring isn't here, but she's peeking around the corner. The elders always said you could smell it before you saw it. Not flowers, not grass, but thaw. Damp soil. The distant memory of green things waking up. And you think you catch a whiff of it now, underneath the wood smoke and boiled grain and wool that's never quite dry. You rise creaking. Your sister is already up, combing her hair in the firelight. She hums a tune, a new one you haven't heard since autumn. You raise an eyebrow. She shrugs and says, "Felt right." Your father is already outside, checking the fences. He hasn't yelled about snow once. Your mother stirs something on the fire. It smells less like porridge and more like hope. Breakfast is still humble, stewed oats with the last of the dried plums. But it tastes different. You don't know if it's the fruit, the light, or the idea that this season might eventually end. Today's chores include checking the thatch, emptying the compost, and fetching kindling from the woods. You've done them all before, 100 times. But today, your feet don't drag as much. You hum as you go. And while you work, you dream. You dream of fields soft with clover, of washing linens without breaking the ice first, of windows open to air that doesn't bite, of shoes that don't crunch and breath that doesn't fog, of sleeping without 3 layers and a pig for warmth. Historians might tell you that the medieval peasant's life was static, that seasons came and went, but life never changed. But you know that's not true. Winter teaches you how to wait, and spring teaches you how to hope. You pick up a stick and draw a line in the frost on the barrel. Just one line. No reason. Just a mark that says, "I made it to here." That night, when the fire crackles strong and the dog doesn't shiver in her sleep, your sister speaks aloud what everyone has been thinking. It's turning. No one answers, but no one disagrees. You crawl into bed, pulling the blanket high over your shoulders. You feel the old cold clinging in the corners of the room, but it doesn't settle as deep. The straw feels softer, or maybe it's just your imagination. You close your eyes and think of green fields, of the first snowdrop pushing up through wet earth, of muddy paths and the smell of sheep in the sun, of warmth not borrowed from the fire, but given freely by the sky. And you know it's still weeks away, months even, but you also know it's coming, because it always does. And until then, you'll keep sleeping in wool socks, you'll keep sharing blankets with the dog, you'll keep chasing warmth in every bowl, every laugh, every lullaby. Because this long cold night, it has nearly passed. And you have nearly made it through. So now, as the fire dims and the last flickers of orange disappear beneath the ash, let's rest here together for a little longer. The room is quiet again. The laughter has faded, the chores are done, and even the wind outside seems to have curled up and gone still. You're warm now, wrapped in thick blankets, both real and remembered, The straw beneath you doesn't itch so much anymore. The dog has settled at your feet. You can feel her soft breath, rising and falling. The sounds of the village are distant now, just the soft rustle of sleep, the occasional creak of the beams, and the hush of snow resting on the roof. That's all. No more frost to battle tonight, no more water to crack. Just the steady rhythm of a house breathing in time with the dark. You've done well. You've faced the worst of it. The bitter cold, the scratching straw, the haunted silence. You've listened to stories and whispered your own. You've waited, hoped, survived. Now the season is turning, slowly but surely. And so you too can begin to soften. Let the cold inside you melt, just a little. So breathe in once more, deep and slow. Let your shoulders sink. Let your hands relax. Let your thoughts drift like snowflakes, settling gently across your mind. The night is long, but it doesn't last forever. Spring is waiting. Sleep well, friend.